Majora's Mask, Chapter 56, The Man Behind the Masks, Part 4. The mask salesman frowned. Spare me the doomsday nonsense. I didn't come here to listen to a mystic talk about fire and brimstone. I've heard that story 1,000 times over. Not fire and brimstone, the man with purple eyes said. With water, Hyrule will drown in a great flood. The mask salesman did not reply immediately. Oh, he's original, he thought. I can at least give him that. The sewers were dark and dank. Water dripped from pipes running along the walls and ceilings and through cracks in the stoneware. A small pub sat at an intersection between 3 man-sized tunnels of waste and metal, all beneath Hyrule. The barkeep looked as filthy as his job likely demanded, futilely rubbing a wet cloth over his counter nearby. The entire pit stop was on a raised platform, blessedly above the running water. Each visitor at the handful of tables was either hidden within a cloak or proudly wore their grime. The masked salesman naturally belonged to the former group. Not fire and brimstone, he said in a mocking tone. How can you be so sure? His mystic snorted in reply. His skin was sickly gray, and his sparse hair was white. This man's purple eyes likely stood out anywhere he went. Any who say otherwise are false, the mystic said. 10 years from now, a great hero will travel through time and seal an even greater villain away, but the seal will only last a year. After then, it will weaken, and the evil will break free, devouring an unsuspecting world by raining destruction from above. The masked salesman's expression darkened from within his hood. He'd heard that specific prophecy from others twice before, but this was the first to mention a flood. Just stories and fables, he thought. Prophecies do not concern me. So soon after the Civil War has ended, no less. We've only been at peace for a year. Could the gods really be so cruel? The gods don't have anything to do with it, the purple-eyed man smiled. The great evil can only be stopped by an equally great evil. Well, that sounds awfully counterproductive for us, doesn't it? Besides, I'm not here to find a great evil. You know why I'm here. Necromancy. The mystic spoke the word softly, suddenly more cautious than before. He glanced around to ensure the other guests were preoccupied at their tables. Surely you must realize only a great evil is capable of something so dark. Tell me, who do you wish to bring back from the dead? A child? A friend? A lover? That's none of your concern. The dark sorcerer snapped. Can you help me or not? I can only spin you a tale, but I fear to relay it to someone of your ilk, a simple, ambitious man who isn't too far over his head. Who knows what dark horrors you'll unleash upon the world? None I can't control. The masked salesman was surprised when his confidence deepened the mystic's smile. Many have claimed to be well-versed in the art of necromancy, but are all liars, the purple-eyed man said. They will give you a show, direct your eyes elsewhere, and suddenly the dead will have returned. But they offer only a farce. It is easy to make people believe something has happened that they so desperately want, truly reanimating the flesh, so that the person is alive again. There is only one thing capable of performing such darkness. Its deeds are bloody and terrible, and it is also the great evil I spoke, the only power capable of defending Hyrule. Majora's Mask. The mask salesman's eyes widened, but he kept his face hidden. A mask? He asked. He'd never heard the name Majora before, but as a sorcerer and mask maker by trade, this could be no coincidence. The old man nodded. But Majora's Mask has not been in this world for many, many years. It was sealed into a realm of darkness, where only shadows stroll about. An ancient tribe of Gerudo realized the evil they had summoned, and so they sent 4 of their elders to ensure the seal remained in place. There it has slept for many a generation, and there it will continue to sleep. How do you reach this dark realm? Impossible, the mystic said. A door made from the Tree of Light is the only portal there, and it has been lost for generations. Only a shard of its dark world counterpart remains, so there's no telling whether its Hyrule twin remains intact. It would be a fool's errand to attempt to find it, and even if you did, it would be useless without a shard from its dark world equal. The masked salesman's eyes widened further. Where is the shard? He asked. The man with purple eyes reached into his shirt and pulled out a piece of wood, flashing his toothless grin again. The resemblance was unmistakable, and the sorcerer's suspicions were confirmed. It was made from the same bark as the door in his hut. A familiar shade of paint covered one half of it. The masked salesman reached out to grab it, but the purple-eyed man drew back, laughing. It's not for sale. And besides, you can't use it. He paused, raising an eyebrow. What makes you believe this tale so easily when you were so skeptical of my doomsday prediction? Because the door you speak of is in my basement, he thought. The masked salesman stood and applied the ReDead mask before the old man could react. His scream was cut short as his blood froze. The dark sorcerer heard commotion behind him when the other patrons realized what was happening. The masked salesman turned around, and for a moment, the old man was free. What? The barkeep had begun, but then he was frozen next. Alongside the dark sewer's 3 other patrons, he made blood rush to their skulls, and they all fainted, collapsing to the floor. Then the masked salesman spun back to freeze the old man in his glare before he could stand. He forced the mystic to hand him the wooden shard. The masked salesman observed it closely before turning back to his captive. What else do you know about this realm? This mask? The door that can lead me there. No, the mystic said. I won't tell you anything else. It's too dangerous. I only meant to entertain, to tell distant tales that can't hurt anyone. You have no idea the powers you'd awaken. Which is exactly why I want to learn. The purple-eyed man refused to say more. The dark sorcerer sighed. You're really trying my patience, you know that? He pulled out the mask of truth and learned the secrets for himself, leaving the man's head empty and raving mad. He sat upon the altar accompanied only by torchlight, fiddling with a shard of wood in his fingers. It matched the doors in the far corner perfectly. Yet despite that, there was no hole or gap that the shard could slide into. As the mystic had stated, the wooden shard was from its counterpart in another realm. A realm of darkness, the masked salesman thought. After reading those purple eyes, he discovered the realm's name, Termina. Allegedly, its inhabitants were responsible for its meaninglessness. They were shadows, shades of people from other worlds, dead or alive, who had appeared there. That was all the mystic had known. Otherwise, the masked salesman only knew about the Grey Witch's price.
There's always a price.
Only a person akin to Termina's shadows could enter the realm.
Purposeless, confused, wounded, overwhelmed with grief and loss.
He would likely be exempt since he sold his name, and even if that wasn't the case, he'd lost everything before he was a man grown. He turned to the piano. The mask salesman only had to access the light magic in the wooden shard to go to Termina, and he had an easy way of doing that. The only thing that gave him pause was his quarry, Majora's mask. His research had taught him that Majora was a demon, sealed within a mask. Thinking of that brought the altar's coldness into clarity, stirring beneath him.
Your fate will be inescapably bound as one,
the Grey Witch had said after his sacrifice. The name Majora didn't sound familiar, and it was nothing like the incomprehensible, head-splitting word Navi had used to address him. Then again, he realized that had been the point of selling it. The Grey Witch had told him he wouldn't recognize his name again, so he could never know for sure. The only person capable of confirming had abandoned him forever. The power to raise the dead will be worth all of this, he thought. Since commanding light magic, he discovered the power to command wind, fire, people's minds, the blood of living animals, and to keep death at bay. Though the last one, the all-night mask, had been one he'd found rather than created, but undoing death. That power only exists in one place, and it's already trapped inside of a mask. It would be his. The mask salesman climbed off the stone table and walked to his piano bench, dragging his bag of masks and possessions with him. It lay against him in the hopes that it would travel with him. The mask salesman gripped the shard and stretched his fingers. Then, he played the Song of Healing. It was beautiful, as always, in the dark room lit by torches. There was not a creature to watch fade away before firelight. Instead, the sorcerer felt his own head nodding off, and his fingers slipped on the keys and played a wrong note. Instantly, his mind snapped awake. He tried again, and this time, he didn't slip. A strange feeling gradually overtook him, starting in his stomach and spreading through his limbs. As his vision darkened, he wondered if this was what his victims experienced. The song stopped when the masked salesman could no longer play, but the world around him kept fading. His last thought was panic. Have I turned myself into a mask? Visions flashed across his mind, and he saw an endless procession of faces and events played out before him over and over. He saw them repetitively, the same things, the same people, the same actions, as if he'd entered some loop that never ended, repeating back to the beginning every time. The feeling intensified until it was part of him. It was still there, but now he had been forced to accept it and call it his own, never again to be rid of it. The entire time he continued spinning through the air, and then the world returned with stunning clarity. The masked salesman stumbled backwards, splashing into water. He barely caught himself from falling, and thankfully, only the hem of his purple robes got wet. The masked salesman blinked the brain fog away as he took in his surroundings. He appeared on top of a deku flower in a shallow pond. The large room's dirt walls extended into infinite blackness, and 2 unlit torches flanked the water. There wasn't a way in or out of the underground chamber. The masked salesman caught a glimmer of green above him, somehow evading the water's reflection. A massive emerald shone brighter than firelight ever could, levitating high over his head. A dark shape was obscured within it. He stepped back to get a better view, wondering what magic held in its place. There's a person inside, the masked salesman realized. The prisoner appeared to be a child, their arms thrust into the air and mouth open in a scream of terror. Frozen. A skull child. The masked salesman looked at this oddity for a long while. The glowing emerald prison never moved, and neither did the entrapped skull child. I'll let that mystery be for now, he decided. Trying to free this creature could lead to more trouble than it was worth. He instead lifted his now wet backpack and returned it to his shoulders. He walked to a section of the dirt wall between the torches, running his hands along the surface. He quickly found a loose notch, which unlatched to reveal an enclosed hallway on the other side. Like the room behind him, it was underground, but unlike the room behind him, There was not a mystical green gem to illuminate the absolute darkness. The mask salesman gulped as he pulled out a mask fashioned into a Dodongo's face. Is Terminal one massive underground cave system? A land of half-shadow cave dwellers would likely not be welcoming. He opened his palm and conjured a small flame. The dancing fire lit his way, and his boots stepped silently over dirt. It became less cave-like as he went. Bits and pieces of darkened stone revealed this had once been a hallway. Plant matter was everywhere, appearing to have ripped through the underground building to leave it in ruin. He wondered if it was related to the trapped skull child. All dying plants stretched behind him as if eager to catch someone. Soon, he came upon an enormous crater in the tunnel. His eyes widened, noticing a Deku flower at its edge and the passageway's continuation on the other side. The masked salesman approached the hole's edge with his magical fire for lighting. It did not put a dent in the dark descent, which was a chasm that stretched even further to unknown depths. The masked salesman felt something down there, some great power, like I can feel within the stone table. The masked salesman grasped the wall with his free hand to examine the hard-packed dirt, wondering if he could climb down. The dark sorcerer shot a ball of fire into the darkness. Instantly, his head swam, mimicking the feeling that had overtaken him as he passed into this realm. The sorcerer hurried away from the edge before he fell in. His ball of fire never hit anything, continuing into darkness. His vision kept spinning regardless. Pain and nausea flooded him. An endless cycle, becoming a part of me. He quickly identified the force's nature, a defense mechanism. A magical object was far down that hole, and it did not want to be discovered. If he tried climbing down, the feeling would quickly overwhelm him until he fell to his death. There was no use trying to descend. He wondered if it was Majora's mask. If it is, then I'll be back. He removed the Dodongo mask, wore the cyclone mask, and conjured magical winds to guide him across the hole. He kept going. When he approached the last stretch of hallway, the feeling returned. He supposed it was the same defense mechanism keeping creatures out, but at that moment, all the sorcerer wanted to do was leave. I must keep going this time, he thought. He could hear running water and turning gears through the doorway, and he pressed through the last of the plant-covered stone tunnel. The spinning madness was short-lived this time. It ended abruptly when he passed into a large building. He stepped onto a platform, and nearby, a man-made stream of water cooled the dark stone around him. He climbed a series of wooden ramps spiraling upward, looking around in awe at spinning gears powering an unknown mechanism. When he made it to the next floor, he followed the gears to a spinning pole, which shot up through a hole in the floor to continue turning more machinery far above him. The vast, expansive platform served as a stage. Below him, the running water brought the building to life, and above him, he recognized the inner workings of a clock tower. Oh, the biggest one I've ever seen, he thought. The clanking gears and splashing were calming in the tower's darkness. He looked across the stage at a small staircase. At its top, a set of doors blocked out all but a sliver of sunlight. They were wooden and familiar. The dark sorcerer took slow, careful steps as he approached the familiar doorway. He donned his stone mask and touched the wood lightly with his fingers. It was warm. He pushed them open, bracing himself to face a world of shadow people as the doors creaked. The sunlight was blinding. The mask salesman covered his eyes, even with the limited protection his mask offered. He slipped through before the door had opened much, carefully closing them behind himself as his pupils adjusted. He found a massive town square. Villagers, merchants, and carpenters filled the busy walled area with life. None of them had noticed the invisible man slip through. The masked salesman stepped forward in awe, mouth agape from behind the mask. Impossible! It was an entire realm, filled with people, buildings, and a town of its own. He was astonished. The sky was the same blue, and the midday sun was just as bright as Hyrule's. The voices, the buildings, the spoken tongue, it was all so similar. This isn't a realm of shadows, he thought. A land of nothing. A set of magic doors, a piano, and a song separated two distinct parallel worlds of people, and neither was aware of the other. Maybe he had the wrong realm. Maybe this wasn't Termina. The sorcerer stepped further into the crowd. The clock tower appeared to be in the walled village's center. The masked salesman gracefully avoided all passerbys who could not see him. The clock tower stood tall as its face ticked away the day's remaining time. He waited for the right moment to remove his mask and lower his hood, revealing his red hair and squinty eyes, still adjusting. Excuse me? The masked salesman said, grabbing a passing villager's shoulder. The young man turned around, eyes bright. Can you tell me where we are? The man's brow wrinkled, looking curiously at the masked salesman's large backpack. South Clocktown, are you lost? No, I just... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Who rules here? Rules? The man smiled, clearly amused by his naivety. The crowd continued swirling around them in broad daylight. Mayor de Tour. Mayor? The sorcerer had meant something bigger. Who ruled this town was irrelevant. Where is Hyrule in relation to here? High what now? The young man's amusement had now turned to irritation. I'm sorry, but I have to go before my guildmaster wonders where I've gone. If you have questions, talk to the mayor. The man stepped aside, pointing to a staircase to the left. If you follow that up to East Clocktown, it'll be up another staircase on the other side of the plaza. He smiled, nodding to the mysterious man in purple as he went on his day. So they aren't aware of the realm I come from. The masked salesman grabbed the shoulder of a passing woman next. Is this Termina? The woman laughed. Aye, this is Termina, and that's the sun. Over there is a wall, and that big blue thing over our heads is the sky. Is there anything else I can help you with, love? The sorcerer met her sarcastic smile with disdain, turning away and walking mindlessly forward. Where do I go? He was in an entirely new world, had no idea where he was, and was looking for a single mask amidst it all. The masked salesman bumped into a man backing away from a stall. Oop, so sorry, the man said, setting down the box he'd been lifting. I didn't mean to hit you. It's okay, the sorcerer said. The masked salesman froze when he saw the man's face. He was as tall as the masked salesman, though less lanky. His hair was brown, and the middle-aged man bore hardly any wrinkles. His clothing was simple. His brown jerkin gave him away as a commoner. His dark eyes were immediately warm and familiar. The sorcerer stepped backward from the unexpected ghost, his head swimming. Are you okay? The man asked. The sorcerer's mouth went dry. Papa, he thought. His father stood there as if it wasn't a miracle. His face was healthy and colorful, no longer ghostly white and blood-stained. A smile broke the masked salesman's lips, and suddenly he was 8 years old again. All the years between vanished, and he was running from the town well with a bucket of water. You don't remember me? He wasn't the dark sorcerer anymore, or the happy masked salesman. He lost all that man's guile and cunning. Instead, he was that word Navi tried speaking to him, that word he couldn't understand, the one he had sold. I'm afraid I don't, his father said. I'm your son, Roland. I'm your son. The words bubbled out of the masked salesman without a second thought. He remembered the sun's warmth in that village, the rolling hills and the small wooden houses. He remembered the stage and his dad's face smiling from the crowd. His head rested against Papa's shoulder on the bed, the golden ring in a box behind him. Roland's face darkened. I don't. He almost seemed embarrassed. I don't have a son. You have the wrong person. Your wife was named Shira. She was my mother. We lived together in the village near the Kokiri forest. Wife! The man said. Suddenly, irritation replaced his shame. I don't have a wife, and my personal life isn't any of your business. You aren't my son. That's the end of it. The masked salesman remained standing there, watching as his dad returned to his crate. The sorcerer's head slowly cleared, and he realized how stupid he must have sounded. Of course he doesn't remember me, he thought. This was an entirely different realm. How strange that another version of my father is here, one that isn't married to my mother. He remembered finding the word shade to describe this realm's inhabitants, remnants of people from other worlds, dead or alive. However, when his father turned back to face him, the kindness in those eyes was as familiar as his own heartbeat. He's in there, the masked salesman thought. I know it. You're still here, Papa said. Regardless of their awkward encounter, Roland's presence filled the sorcerer with nothing but joy. He's alive, he thought, and well, somewhere, even if it's not Hyrule. Few things could surprise the happy salesman, but his father returning from the grave had proven an exception. He swallowed his gullibility and childishness, even as he still permitted his newfound joy to color his voice. He'd already told the truth, so there was no going back. I'm sorry if I came on a little strongly, the masked salesman said. In truth, I'm from another world entirely, underneath the Clocktower. He pointed toward the wooden doors, and his father's eyes followed. But no one goes under there, he said distantly. Then I'm guessing you haven't heard of Hyrule, the dark sorcerer asked. Roland shook his head. That's the world I'm from. I lost you a long time ago, and now I finally found you again. He realized how foolish that must have sounded, and Papa's confused expression confirmed it. I'm a sorcerer from another realm, and you're my father. Roland looked around to see if anyone else had noticed their strange interaction. There's a whole world under the Clocktower? He asked. Hyrule? Sort of, the masked salesman said. What does being a sorcerer mean? Let me show you. He reached into his robes and pulled out his Dodongo mask. I capture my power inside of masks. He wore it and raised his palm, conjuring a flame in the center of his hand. Roland gasped and backed into the stall. I'm telling the truth, the masked salesman said. The mask of truth. He pulled it out next and offered it to him. Here, take this. You can use it to read my mind and know I'm telling the truth. Roland shook his head. I'm sorry, I don't have time for this. My delivery for Skyvale is due in 4 days, so I have to pack and leave tomorrow. Skyvale? The sorcerer asked, stowing away both of his masks. His father paused before answering. It's a region far away from here, across the mountains of Snowhead. It's a long journey. Then let me come with you, the sorcerer said. Roland was too stunned to have a response. Please, the masked salesman said. A faint voice tried to chide him, reprimanding him for trusting a stranger so fully and wholeheartedly. But this is my father, he thought. Nothing else matters but that right now. So much suffering and despair had vanished in a second. He did not wish to welcome any of that grief back. I want to know more about this world, the sorcerer said. And I already showed you I can use magic. Let me come with you, and I can protect you, and I can prove to you I'm telling the truth. Papa looked the sorcerer up and down, and the masked salesman was surprised when he agreed. Maybe he's realizing how similar we look, the sorcerer decided. Something in him is telling him this is all true, and it's a voice he can't ignore. I'll be leaving at dawn tomorrow, Papa said. Meet me at the northern gate. The masked salesman nodded. Thank you. They stood there in a moment of awkward silence. The sorcerer wanted to hug him, but he knew better than to try his luck too much. What's your name? Roland asked. The masked salesman's stomach lurched. Onmund. The masked salesman nervously paced around his basement stone altar. I'm going to meet my father, he thought. My father. We're going on a journey together. All thoughts of Majora's Mask had vanished. He was no longer interested in pursuing power. Hyrule would be fine without the happy masked salesman or the dark sorcerer. All that mattered was Roland, the father he had lost so many years ago. This is far better than returning him from the dead with magic. It was as if he had never died. A blank slate, a second chance. Returning to Hyrule was much simpler than going to Termina. All he had to do was grasp the wooden doors, wooden shard in hand, and will himself in the Grey Witch's hut. He had returned to his lair to prepare for the journey, stock up on rupees, and sleep in a familiar bed. He hoped that Hyrule's and Termina's clocks ran concurrently, but he would leave early just in case, especially since I'll have to hike through the dark tunnels again. It was around midnight outside, but by the time he hiked through the caves to Clocktown, dawn would be near. The masked salesman grabbed his backpack and the chip of wood, bringing both to his piano bench. He played the Song of Healing, and its notes flickered as the torches did, illuminating the doors he would soon see on the other side. Hyrule faded away. When the world returned, it was Termina. His palms were over the Clocktower doors instantly, and he pushed them open into the dead of night. He was shocked to find an empty South Clocktown plaza. Why am I here? He thought. He quickly spun to see if anyone had noticed him, but the village was abandoned. He donned his backpack, which had also appeared with him, and hurried to the ramp around the Clocktower. That was unexpected, he thought. Apparently, only one's first visit to Termina teleported them to the underground Deku Flower. Maybe now I'll appear right here in Clocktown every time. That would make his life easier, but he'd have to make sure he wore his stone mask before playing his piano, lest I draw unnecessary attention to myself. It was the exact same time in Hyrule as in Clocktown. The village was familiar enough for him to navigate now, as he'd done his surveying after parting ways with his father. Yet despite being early and recognizing his surroundings, his nerves grew as he crossed North Clocktown's field and reached the gate. He felt like a child again. He donned his stone mask after a guard tried to bother him. He waited, alone, in the northern district's grassy field until the sun eventually broke Termina's horizon. When he finally spotted Papa approaching in the distance, the sorcerer removed his mask and approached him. "Good morning," he said, smiling. Roland was not quick to return his friendly tone. "Hello, Onmund." The masked salesman's optimism faltered slightly, but he clung to it still. Their journey would take several days together. There was plenty of time to break the ice. The mountains had been warm and green for most of their trip, but this far north, the winds had turned frigid. Thankfully, the masked salesman's golden ring protected him from feeling cold. The enchanted blue gem regulated his body, so it still felt like a pleasant spring day. Roland, however, kept his coat pulled tightly around him, shivering in the flurries dotting the landscape. Mountain walls loomed before them, and a blank landscape of snow and rock stretched behind. The southern valleys that belonged to the Gorons were mere dots on the horizon now. This far north, they were looking for a cave somewhere along the nearby cliffs. Papa had said it was marked by its perfectly circular shape. "Have you been to Skyvale before?" the masked salesman asked. "Yes," Roland said, speaking over their boots' crunches in the thin snow. 4 times. I like traveling through Snowhead, and Skyvale is an exciting place in its own right. They have golden dust in abundance. which they like to trade for Chateau Romani. Chateau Romani? It's a famous milk by Romani Ranch, on the other side of Clocktown. I have quite a bit in my bag. The masked salesman nodded, and soon after, they came upon the cave. Its shape was exactly as Roland had foretold. The sorcerer wondered if that was a natural occurrence. Nothing stopped them as they passed harmlessly inside. The only deterrent was the darkness, which would become absolute after rounding the next corner. Roland made to retrieve a torch, but the masked salesman stopped him. He pulled out the Dodongo mask instead and conjured fire to light their way instead. The cave floor descended deeper underground. "That must be really nifty," Roland said. The masked salesman kept his attention focused on the dark path ahead. "Do I have to worry about anything jumping out at me?" His father shook his head. "These caves are safe. The greatest thing you risk is tripping in the dark." "It's not exactly easy to get to Skyvale from Clocktown," the sorcerer said. "People must need a good reason to venture so far." Roland agreed. "That gold dust will have me settled for a good while after I bring it back." He smiled to himself, and that made the masked salesman smile too. "I miss that," he thought. Papa's warm smiles had always put him at ease. Their journey had proven a friendly one between acquaintances. Even if Roland had yet to accept that he was his son, Papa was the exact same man who'd raised him as a child. That was enough for now. "So, you don't have a family?" the masked salesman said, summoning the courage to finally broach the subject. He looked at Roland from behind the green lizard facepiece. "No," he said, and his expression darkened again. Talking about family makes him uncomfortable, the masked salesman thought. What secrets did Roland have? Were they secrets his father had kept too? "It's not exactly possible for me to have a son," Roland added. "That can't be true," the masked salesman said before he could stop himself. "Maybe if I brought you back to Hyrule, you'd remember that you did have one, in another life." Roland's expression became even grimmer. The sorcerer dared to push further. "The Clocktower doors are portals between Hyrule and Termina. Maybe, if I brought you back, you'd remember your life before. This realm's magic has just made you forget, so being in Hyrule could undo it." "Maybe," Roland said uncertainly. "I'm not sure if I want to remember a life where—" He trailed off as if having trouble finding the words. Whatever he's trying to say, he's either too afraid to say or doesn't want me to know. "Do you have a family, Onmund?" Papa said instead. The name Onmund hurt like a cut. A lie I have to tell. He did not know how his father would react to the truth. Even if Roland logically wrapped his head around selling a name to a demon, the moral implications would be hard for anyone to swallow. Roland rephrased his question when the masked salesman didn't reply. "Did you find someone to make a family with? After I died?" The sorcerer had told only the happy masked salesman portion of his life, leaving out his deeds as the dark sorcerer, his revenge on the Grey Sparrow, and Navi. All decent chunks, to be discussed later. "I didn't," the masked salesman said, finding the question odd. He had only ever loved one person, and she was gone. Then it hit him. He recognized his father's discomfort, because it was the same as his own. A fairy? A Zora? A man? All left bearing children out of the question, and if Termina's approach to such matters was as unforgiving as Hyrule's, Roland was justified in keeping that secret close. Navi's words still haunted the sorcerer.
"That's not okay. I'm a fairy and you're a Hylian. You can't... We can't... That's not right. If people found out about this, they'd have you hanged or jailed or, I don't know, banished. A fairy and a Hylian can't love each other like that. It's not allowed."
"I haven't," the masked salesman repeated more resolutely. He turned to look at Roland, and Papa met his gaze. An unspoken confession passed between them. No reason to say more, the sorcerer thought. His stomach twisted itself into knots when he realized his father likely never wanted a wife or son in Hyrule. A realm of shadows, he remembered. Shadows that might be more real than their real-life counterparts. They stopped when they reached an open cavern along the cave pathway. A few dips and rises interrupted the floor, and one on the right could have served as a table. The passageway kept going on the opposite wall, but his fire's reflection caught something else first. The masked salesman approached the wall to discover markings. Dark gray chalk spanned the room's entirety, and the sorcerer pieced together its fragments to find a picture. "Who drew this?" the masked salesman asked. "No one," Roland said. "You might have magic, but Termina has some of its own, too." He walked up to the wall himself. "It's Mortalitis' wall. It's dark magic." The masked salesman laughed. "I thought you told me I didn't have to worry about anything jumping out at me." "Oh, the picture won't attack you, but it could prove that you're from another realm." The sorcerer lowered his hand's flame to turn back to his father. Roland had his attention. "The wall foretells the doom of one's home. Once you place your hand on the rock, the chalk will change if you're from elsewhere." "So, this doom is Termina's?" Roland nodded. "They say its magic is never wrong." "How can you know for sure?" the sorcerer asked. "If it's always been Woodfall, Snowhead, Great Bay, Akana Canyon, Clocktown, and Skyvale here in Termina, what other lands could have fallen?" His father shifted uneasily. "There haven't ever been other regions here." More secrets. Or things his father did not know? Because he's a shadow? No, that couldn't be true. The masked salesman returned to the picture. It was a mural of a vast field of ashes, and its desolation was without end, except for a round, hard rock wedged in the apocalypse's center. Lightning bolts and grumbling clouds cut across the canvas, and despite the dark message, the artwork was beautifully drawn. Heedless, the sorcerer placed his hand upon the cool rock, and the lines came alive. The storm and Termina's charred remains undid themselves as the chalk reconnected to form new images. Ashes became waves, and the cloudy sky became even more lethal. The masked salesman backed away, mouth agape. "Not fire and brimstone. With water. Hyrule will drown in a great flood." He remembered the mystic's words. The purple-eyed man had claimed that only Majora's Mask could stop the great drowning. Could it be true? The magical drawing suggested as much. Immense waves crashed into Hyrule's villages and cities, though somehow the castle stood protected at its center. The dark sorcerer swallowed nervously. We should keep moving. He was not prepared to talk about this with Roland. His priorities had shifted after meeting Papa, but now his bubble of newfound happiness had begun to burst. As if to solidify his growing dread, frantic footsteps echoed their way. Someone was running back from Skyville toward them. Roland and the masked salesman exchanged puzzled looks. The footsteps were ungraceful and heavy, and the approaching person was clearly out of breath too. Before they could hide, a man sprinted around the corner and stopped when he found them. His eyes were wild with terror. "Run!" he screamed. "Run while you still can!" "What's wrong?" the masked salesman asked. "Skyvale, he's going to destroy it!" The man went to sprint past them, but the sorcerer tried to grab and stop him. The stranger responded by punching him in the face. The masked salesman staggered, and his mask fell off, immediately extinguishing the magical flames. The man continued running, and soon his heavy breathing faded. "Hunmond!" Roland knelt by his side, his dark eyes worried. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," the masked salesman said, rubbing the knot on his forehead. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had gotten close enough to harm him. His guard was down with his father present. "That man should be dead," the masked salesman thought. "No one gets away with hurting the dark sorcerer." Roland offered a hand to help him up, breaking his dark thoughts. He retrieved his thankfully unscathed mask, and he reapplied it to conjure fire again. "How bad is it?" the sorcerer asked. "It's a bruise," Roland said. He paused when the masked salesman walked toward the passageway leading onward. Are you sure we should keep going? We'll be fine. I have my masks. Suddenly, the ground shook terribly. The masked salesman lost his balance and fell into the wall, as did Roland. They both tried to stand, but the shaking wouldn't relent. A loud roaring came next, growing with alarming speed, as if some horrifying machine was bellowing right for them. Roland stumbled over to his son, and they both stood together in the earthquake. Rocks dislodged from the cave ceiling, crashing into the ground and narrowly missing them. Hanmund! Papa exclaimed, though he could do nothing to stop the chaos. We'll be okay, the masked salesman said, shouting over the shaking earth. The roaring only worsened, and soon it overwhelmed them until thought and sound blurred into a mind-numbing screech. The masked salesman turned to see a light flower at the end of Skyvale's cave. It grew brighter, intensifying with the shaking. Heat came next. Fire, the sorcerer realized. An explosion, except it was not orange or red, but purple, as if plagued with darkness, and it hurtled through the cave in a massive wave toward them. His father screamed as the shaking, the heat, and the explosive sound became their entire world. Instinctively, the masked salesman exchanged his Dodongo mask for the cyclone one and shot out his arms. The conjured wind bellowed forth more powerfully than ever before, meeting the purple fire before it reached them. The explosion did not relent. It shot into the cavern, but the magical barrier of wind tightened itself to swirl closely around the two men. Roland cowered, holding onto his son as the magical gales became a thick barrier between them and the dark fire. All was chaos for a time. And then the inferno dissipated. The masked salesman lowered his arms, and the mask's superheated wind vanished. He fell to his knees, allowing the adrenaline to fade with each deep breath. He wiped sweat from his forehead, clearly noting that the ring had limits to its protection. Thankfully, he had borne the brunt of the heat to save Roland. The cavern had been scorched, and rubble lay scattered. Thankfully, the shaking had stopped, and the sorcerer was surprised to see the magical chalk remained unscathed. Roland and the masked salesman took a moment to stand. The remainder of their journey was mostly silent as they walked to Skyvale, clinging in equal parts to hope and denial. All they found at that cave's end was a field of ashes. The plain of desolation reached as far as the eye could see, and phantom purple flames still licked the newly scorched landscape. Blackened buildings and bodies had been charred beyond recognition. Skyvale was no more. The journey back was far less enjoyable than the journey there. Their days had passed mournfully, and soon the masked salesman treaded over the final bridge with Roland by his side. It swayed over the gorge separating Termina Field from the beginning of the Snowhead Trail. Clocktown's walls stood not far away. Should we tell the mayor? The masked salesman asked. Roland had not wanted to speak much about what had happened, but they might be the only survivors. Who knew if that man had made it out of the caves in time? Tell him what? Roland asked. That Skyvale has fallen? He said. They had scarcely walked across the newly created wasteland before deciding there was nothing else there. It had been completely and utterly obliterated. If the purple flames are any indication, dark magic is responsible, and Clocktown needs to be ready in case it comes there. The masked salesman could guess which entity was responsible. The mystic failed to mention that Majora would be trying to destroy Termina too. If the dark sorcerer could leave this realm at will, then even with a curse sealing the mask here, it was only a matter of time before... Skyvale? His father asked, interrupting his thoughts. I don't know what you're talking about. The masked salesman stopped, dumbfounded. Are you trying to make a joke? No, Roland seemed to be struggling with the words. You left Clocktown to go to Skyvale, remember? You were going to trade your milk for their golden dust? But that doesn't make any sense. There's not anything beyond Snowhead. There's never been anything there. The masked salesman turned away grimly. He's becoming more like a shadow, he thought. Urgency grew within him. We should go to Hyrule immediately. What? His father asked, still appearing confused. We should go to my world and get your memories back. I don't know if that's a good idea. I do. This realm, it's eating your mind. You don't remember I'm your son. You've never heard of Hyrule, and you've already forgotten about Skyvale. But you're a real person. I can bring you back, and everything will be fine. Are you sure? Trust me, the masked salesman said, grabbing Papa's shoulder. I know what I'm doing. You'll be fine, and you'll remember. He looked at Roland for a long time, hoping he would notice their similarities once more. Please, I can't lose you again. Roland nodded uncertainly. Okay, I'll do it. They walked to South Clocktown in the dead of night, rounding the clock tower to be in the plaza. Roland eyed it nervously, paying special attention to the doors. It'll be okay, the masked salesman persisted. Roland took one last look around Clocktown. He took in the glowing full moon and breathed in his realm's fresh air. He closed his eyes to center himself. Then let's go. The masked salesman grabbed his father by the hand. With the shard firmly in his other one, he pressed it up against the doors. He could faintly hear the turning gears and rushing water from within. He looked at Roland's face, blank with trust, as he gave the silent command. Take me home, he thought. Take us home. The shard warmed in his hand, just like the door, and the world around them faded. The masked salesman appeared at his piano bench, but Roland appeared at the doors leaning against his wall. The sorcerer blinked the fogginess away, standing to see his father try standing and stumble onto the stone altar. Roland was shaking, he realized, eyes wide as he stared ahead. What? Where am I? Papa asked. He looked like a scared child. The torches illuminated nothing but panic on his face. He tried to stand, but his legs wobbled too much, even with the altar's support. The masked salesman jumped from the bench to help him, but Papa slipped off and hit the floor before he reached him. The sorcerer tried to help him up, but Roland remained limp and trembling. The masked salesman uncertainly lay on the ground beside him, trying to stifle his father's shaking before he hurt himself more. You're in Hyrule. Remember, you're in Hyrule, the masked salesman said, as calmly as he could. Papa instinctively buried himself in the sorcerer's chest. He returned the hug, cradling his shivering mess of a father. You're not in Termina anymore. We took you out, so you'd get your memories back. Do you remember? Papa refused to make eye contact with him. No, he said faintly, still shaking as if from a horrible fever. No, I want to go back. Fear came for the masked salesman next. No, he said, trying to push it away. You'll be fine. Everything's going to be fine. I have to bring you back, Papa. You have to remember. Take me back, his father repeated. Roland pulled himself away from the hug, staring at the ceiling instead. He cried, and his eyes seemed blank as if he couldn't see anything. Please, I beg you, take me back. The masked salesman tried to fight back his own tears. It'll be okay. I promise you. Roland kept shaking his head. His face appeared strained and newly wrinkled. Take me back. Take me back. Roland stood at the cliff's edge by his son's side. They stared out at the sea, which was a soothing contrast to the gray hut and forest behind them. The rocky edge below them was steep. Papa had become pale and angular. His hair had lost all color, and his skin was pulled taut against his face. His bones had become prominent against his weathered skin, and his jerkin hung loosely on his body. He was wrinkled with a thick gray beard. His thin hair ran down his back. He seemed an old man, standing there, shaking. When the sun came out from behind a cloud, he cowered. The light was too much for him to bear. Roland tried to scream, but only a small exhale escaped. The masked salesman looked at him with a deep sadness. True, Roland was standing on his own, but hardly. The briefest gust of wind would knock him over. "No, Papa, it's the sun," he said, grabbing his father's shoulder and smiling. "You don't have to be afraid of it. It's the same as in Termina." No, his father said, shaking his head. His voice was as withered and dry as a desert. "Back. I have to go back." He hadn't said anything else for their 2 days in Hyrule. Over 48 hours. He had aged perhaps 20 years, and he only got weaker. The moment he'd crossed into Hyrule, all strength had left him. "I have to keep trying," the sorcerer thought. "Something has to work." No masks or potions had proven effective, however. He stood there. A ghost. The masked salesman noticed movement a moment before it was too late. Roland stepped toward the cliff's edge and went to walk off. "No!" The masked salesman grabbed him just in time. The dark sorcerer took Roland into his arms, pulling him back from the ledge. Back. "What were you thinking?" the masked salesman exclaimed. You can't die again, not after all we've been through." His father merely blinked sheepishly, nuzzling his face into his son as he sobbed again. "Please, take me back." The masked salesman looked up at the sky as he held his father. "Please," the dark sorcerer pleaded, "don't let me lose him again. I just want Papa. I just want him back, please. I can't lose anyone else." Back. The masked salesman sat at the stone table, a book open on its surface. He flipped through its pages furiously, trying to find something, anything. He could hear his father on the other side of the table, lying against the wall. He looked up to see him. 3 more days had passed to make a grand total of 5. His father was unrecognizable. His thin white hair practically enveloped him, and his beard was just as long. His eyes were shrunken and sickly, and he shook so terribly that it pained him. He deliriously looked around the basement, his chalk-white, frail body a sack of bones. Back, take me back. It's going to be okay. Back. I think I might have found something that... Back, take me back! Papa suddenly screamed, leaping at his feet and rolling along the wall, flailing his stick-like arms around. He knocked over a bookshelf, collapsed onto the floor, and continued to writhe. The masked salesman jumped from his chair in shock. Back! I have to go back! As raw and ancient as his voice sounded, the sudden power behind it was terrifying. Papa! No! Stop it now! I can't stay here any longer! Take me back! Papa, please! He stepped over to try and restrain him. You'll hurt yourself! I am not your father! Roland flung himself into the dark sorcerer so their eyes were an inch apart. They were dark, wild, and crazed. The masked salesman was speechless, mouth agape, as his father clung to him with unfathomable desperation. I am not your father! Then he threw himself off the sorcerer and crashed into the altar, collapsing again onto the floor. All his strength exhausted, he lay there, once again a trembling mess. The masked salesman was at a loss for words, eyes wide as he stared at the shriveled, broken man on his floor. The words rang in his head, and for a moment, all he could do was stand there. Back, take me back. Unexpectedly, rage overtook the masked salesman. "You want to go back?" he asked. The words felt strange on his tongue. "Back, away, take me back." A dark sorcerer approached the old man and grabbed him by the back of his neck. Roland shrieked, but the masked salesman threw him hard against the clock tower doors anyway. "You want to go back?" The masked salesman screamed, matching his father's crazed expression. "Back, back." "Fine!" he screamed. "I'll send you back to your realm of shadows." "Back, back. You may wear his face, but you're a dead man. You're nothing." "Please." "You're not Roland Dial. You're not the man my father was." The tears came freely now, and the masked salesman stormed to his piano and donned his stone mask, fingers trembling as he reached out for the keys. "Take me back, please, please, take me back." He played the Song of Healing while holding the wooden chip. The old man stumbled out of the clock tower doors. The sun was bright, and he held up a pale, frail hand to block it out. The sky was fiercely blue, a deep, rich sapphire that prevailed over Clocktown. The walls were high around him, and his small chest heaved in and out. The people buzzing around his village looked up from their work. One by one, the hammers stopped. Their conversations at the stalls came to an end. A mother, walking by with her young daughter, auburn hair to her shoulders, only made it halfway across the plaza. Their heads turned, and South Clocktown entered a collective awed silence, staring at the first man to ever exit the clock tower doors. He turned from the sky and sun feebly, hardly aware of the village's many eyes. He took a step forward, his legs shaking. A second and a third followed. By the fourth, he could walk no more. His legs gave out, and the old man collapsed into the plaza's center. The old man, long white hair and frail, angular body shaking, rolled onto his back and stared at the sky. His eyes found the sun, and he smiled. Color returned to his ancient face. He opened his mouth as if to say something. Then he stopped shaking, and his eyes twinkled one last time. His body relaxed, but the smile remained on his lips. The crowd stood in collective silence for a moment longer, and then the chatting began. A guard ran to the fallen man to help him, but he was completely limp. A crowd formed around the mysterious visitor, but no one seemed to know who he was or where he had come from. "He seemed so happy," one woman whispered, bending close to his body as the villagers blocked him from view. The masked salesman watched from the wooden doors hidden by the stone mask and cried silently in the clock tower's darkness.